Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome along to the August edition of the Landlord Lens, the collaboration between the NRLA and Property Tribes, of which I am the community manager and co-host of the webinar, and also a full-time landlord. And I'm joined, of course, by NRLA CEO Ben Beadle, because we turn the Landlord Lens onto the trending topics of the day. And Ben, our previous edition was kind of like a pre-election special in early July. And now, well, I guess this is going to kind of be a post-election special because there's quite a bit to talk about with regards to Labour now in office. And first of all, our new housing minister is Matthew Pennycook. He's the first Labour housing minister for 14 years. Have you had a chance to meet with him, and have you got any kind of first impressions?
Yeah, I have. I was in the first week with Chris Norris, our policy director, talking to Matthew. The good thing is that we've been used to a lot of housing ministers sort of starting over the past 14 years and not really having much insight into their brief. And so often what you do is spend a lot of time bringing them up to speed, or officials would be bringing them up to speed with some of the issues of the day. Now with Matthew, he's been the shadow housing minister for I think 3 years. He's been involved in housing select committees. He's grilled me a number of committees. He knows the brief, and that's helpful. Obviously, well, choose my words carefully. We had a very pleasant meeting. I met him once before one-on-one when he was a shadow minister. He's a numbers guy. He speaks very well. He knows about the sector, but obviously, they have a particular mandate to reform the sector. And I think the fact that the bill is going to be called the Renters' Rights Bill rather than the Renters' Reform Bill probably gives you a clue into some of the thinking. I should say that he's using the summer to kind of get up to speed with some of the things that he will want to do. But certainly in our initial conversations, we were urging him to pick up the consensus of the last Renters Reform Bill and not change it too much. But I suspect that that's wishful thinking.
Oh. Well, he was involved in, the Renters Reform Bill prior to getting his appointment, and he did actually table some of the amendments, and one of them was that a landlord can't sell a property within 2 years of starting a tenancy. That actually seems pretty reasonable to me. If you're going to move house, it's a big upheaval, it's expensive. And I know if I was a tenant, I would want to know that the property was available to rent for a minimum of 2 years. So I think, I'm hoping that he is going to be reasonable.
Well, I hate to disagree so early on in the conversation, but I don't think 2 years is reasonable because it won't work both ways. So I don't think our concession that we fought for, the kind of minimum 6-month period, will be something that gets carried forward. And if it is periodic on day one from the tenant side, then for me, 2 years is far too long if a landlord wishes to sell or to move back in. And so that was one of the first things I tried to clarify with Matthew, because actually what we don't want to do, Vanessa, is there's a not insignificant cohort of people that may get posted overseas or have a job post for a year. They may actually need to come back and live in that property. Now, if we're talking 24 months plus 6 months notice, which is what the amendment was, then I don't know, add on an extra 6 months for if you're lucky, if you have to go to court to get that, then you're looking at really a minimum sort of term of 3 years. And I think that actually that won't help things, because we would much rather have a property available for a year's letting, than not available at all. So I think Mr. Pennycook needs to do a lot of work in relation to that clause. And obviously it was an amendment that wasn't carried forward. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily Labour policy. That's something that they will firm up. But I am expecting in the next couple of weeks or so to be back in with Matthew as he sets out his stall more clearly.
Okay, well, that's interesting to hear about the disparity between the landlord and how long they had to offer the property for, and you know, the tenants you know, liability, how long they're going to be in the property for. So thank you for clarifying that. Section 21, their manifesto said that they would remove it immediately. It's still there. Have you got any update on that?
Well, we called it fairly early, in as much as you don't remove things on day one.
Right.
So you know, that's possibly a little bit of electioneering going on there. In exactly the same way as the Conservatives propose, you have to bring forward legislation. Now, it may well happen sooner, but it was never going to happen on day one, and it won't happen in the first 100 days. I would hazard a guess. So I think I know that will be at the top of his agenda, though, and I don't think it will be. We were successful at linking court reform to Section 21 abolition with the previous administration. I don't think that's going to wash. Is my instinct. So I do think that they will get rid of Section 21. They've been very clear about that. I don't think that they will wait for the reform of the courts. I do believe that they will take forward the grounds that we have carved out as part of the Renters Reform Bill. But that's speculation at this stage. That's just based on my initial conversation with him. But certainly I can't see court reform. I can see court reform happening at some point, but I don't think that he's going to tie the two so readily. So what I want to see is to understand a little bit more about how they propose to introduce Section 21 abolition. And we had a very good chat about the car crash that is Wales, and the Big Bang dates that they introduced there that made possession rates go up 400%. And so I do think that a happy medium here is that it's not retrospective, it applies to new tenancies, with at least a 6-month lead-in period for the sector to be able to get used to it, update contracts, all of that sort of stuff, but not have it, retrospective.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I mean, if the court reform isn't part of the scenario, I can just see there being an absolute world of hurt. And I guess on a more positive note, we have heard that rent controls are off the table. So that's a thumbs up. We know they don't work. That's been obviously shown by what's gone on in Scotland, which hopefully they appear to have taken notice of. Okay, well, let's move on to our trending topics, because they do include some Labour policies, and our trending topics are selected on the day of this webinar, so they're very hot, up to date, the most wanted conversations on property tribes, the most engaged. And our first one, Ben, is a landlord asked, will Labour remove the 20% mortgage relief credit?
I think a lot of people are wanting us to fight for Section 24 reversal. And you would have seen a number of pieces over the last couple of years where we have been pushing for pro-growth tax measures to encourage investment in the sector, and Section 24 is a big part of that. I worry that we're going to have to pivot from asking for an increase to, protecting against a decrease. I don't think anything is off the table at the moment. You don't need to know that I think it would be, we don't need me to tell you that I think it would be a disastrous policy. But, you know, the reality is we have a very strong Labour administration. And if you look back at when Blair was first elected, one of the things that he regrets is not being bold enough in the first sort of 6 months. So it's a very long-winded answer to say that I worry about what's coming in the budget. Obviously, you know, we are well placed to be able to speak with Treasury and Treasury officials and all of that sort of stuff. But, you know, we can see us all being primed by tax changes or the suggestion of tax changes because of the way that it was run for the past 14 years and what they have inherited. I make no political comment on that, but you've one side saying we looked after it, the other side saying it's in a far worse shape than we ever envisaged, and we're going to have to take some bold decisions, even though we said we weren't going to touch taxation. So they wouldn't touch the headline taxes, but all of the bits underneath are fair game. So I don't want to spook the horses at this stage, but I think it's going to be an interesting autumn.
It is, because we do have the budget coming up, as you said, and there are concerns that capital gains tax is going to rise, which, you know, obviously is of concern to landlords who are considering selling up. And what else have we got? EPCs. Actually, they've come out of the traps quite early. The Labour government have, Ed Miliband, with you know, quite a definitive clarification on what they're aiming for in terms of energy efficiency in the private rented sector. So what can you tell us about that, Ben?
Yeah, well, I mean, we got a bit of stick a few months or so ago when it was announced that the Conservative administration was scrapping EPCC and 2025, 2028. And I said at the time, be careful what you wish for on this, because it's only a temporary reprieve. Actually, the best thing that could have happened for us is that they cracked on with maybe 2028 and suggested a D or something, then they would have left it alone. However, we are where we are. And, you know, I think we fully expected this to be reinstated. We've only got the headlines at the moment, but all of our pre-existing research that we have done on retrofit and the merits of it and the difficulties of it and all of that sort of jazz will be dusted down and reutilized again, because we've got some really fascinating research about how the Green Homes Grant failed so spectacularly, some of the difficulties of retrofit as well. And what we need is, they've announced the sticks, I guess, but I don't see any carrots. And so there's a piece of work that we're doing to lobby and campaign, not to say to make EPCC go away, but to think about whether we do have the tradespeople, to think about whether the sector does need support to be able to deliver on this, and how this fits with all of the other bits that they're going to be tweaking in terms of renters' rights, maybe budget changes, and, you know, making that argument that this needs to be a very considered package if they don't want to decimate the supply of housing for tenants even further.
Mm. Well, we've got some questions coming in, which is great, because we do want to remind everybody that this is an interactive webinar. We'd love to hear your questions, your comments. And Siobhan Miller has said it is important to remember that rights and responsibilities go hand in hand. One person's right is someone else's responsibility to provide. If the new bill is a renters' rights bill, there must also be more explicit renters' responsibilities.
I don't disagree with that at all. I just think you're not going to get it, Siobhan.
Okay. Joanna said, what about stamp duty for additional properties? Is there any kind of movement on that?
Well, we did a big piece of research, as you probably recall, with PwC, I think it was, where we were looking at how we could kind of get the growth that we needed, and also still have government make money, because, as you know, when they're giving something away, they're gonna want something back. And it actually showed that by abolishing the 3% additional rate of stamp duty, that there would be 10 million more homes available over a 10-year period. And I think it was £10 billion of additional revenue from other taxes and things like that. So I guess the issue here is that, is a Labour administration likely to be giving what will be perceived as a very significant tax break to investors? I don't see it that way, by the way. I see it as kind of improving and increasing housing stock in the private rented sector, which is to the benefit of everybody within the sector. But obviously, we can appreciate how these things can be spun. So no, in direct answer to the question, but it is something that we regularly talk about, because as we showed in our previous research, the private rented sector is worth £45 billion to the economy, and it employs directly or indirectly almost 400,000 jobs. So it's not just the homes or lack of homes. It's a whole massive contribution to the economy, and I think that's why we deliberately chose to do some of these tax sort of deep dives, if you will, because it is going to be very important to Rachel Reeves. She won't want to lose that income for sure.
Well, still on the energy sort of tip, anonymous attendee has said, has there been any indication that landlords will have to provide EV car charging points at their properties in the future?
Too early to tell, to be honest with you. I know there was some sort of incentive, wasn't there? I don't know if there still is. I forget what it is now, but basically a sort of subsidy if you installed it. What we have to do at the moment, we've only got kind of headlines of EPCs 2030. We haven't got any of the ingredients there under, and that's what's being worked on at the moment. So I think it's going to be a busy autumn for us. So no, for the time being, but I think it's very much a work in progress about what's going to be covered and what's in scope for sure.
Ben, do you think that landlords leaving the sector and rents rising as a result of a shortage of private sector properties when there's extremely high demand, has that actually has the penny dropped with the government? Because all of the rhetoric I hear just doesn't seem to include that point. There's so much talk about landlords just putting up rent, just because, when we all know that the rent is really set by the market. And if you overprice your property, you probably won't get too many inquiries. I mean, is there any evidence that, this fundamental thing about the problem in private renting, that they've actually understood this problem?
Yeah, there was an answer to a question made by Pennycook, who cited the lack of supply as being a principal reason for escalating costs. So that's a step in the right sort of direction. Obviously, the way they plan to deal with this is not to throw sort of tax breaks at the private rented sector, but to build 1.5 or upwards of 1.5 million homes over this parliament, so over a 5-year period. There was discussions, I think, about it potentially being 2 million, but either way, that's not been achieved for some time. And so certainly adding to the overall net supply of housing will be important. We are supportive of growing the social sector, but this is far more than just robbing Peter to pay Paul. Actually, it needs a holistic view. Yes, building more social and affordable housing is absolutely the right thing. Reviewing right to buy, absolutely the right thing. But surely, you would want to, in accepting that the lack of supply is problematic for everybody in the sector. And as I'm at pains to point out, this isn't landlords being greedy. This is landlords trying to cover their costs as a result of the previous administration's war on landlords, war on small landlords, be it through taxation, direct or indirect, like stamp duty and threats of regulation. What I can be sure about is that some of the stuff that they are talking about when it comes to renters' rights and EPCs that they will deliver on. I've no doubt about that. I guess the optimum for us is to really carve out that the PRS is that responsible place it can be, that people have a really good experience in the private rented sector. And I can point to lots and lots of figures that support that, but I can also point to lots of figures that undermine that argument in the English Housing Survey. And that's something that we just have to be very cautious about.
Indeed. Should we have a quick look if there's any other questions before we move on? Do you feel, anonymous attendee again, do you feel they are interested in having private sector landlords, or are they really wanting to encourage corporate landlords, as in, build to rent?
Well, I mean, it's funny because, and I made this point, that whether you're a small landlord or a big landlord or a social landlord or a private landlord, the harsh reality that we have to deal with is you're not going to invest in homes if you're not going to derive a return. End of story. Yes, there will be, well, even if it's a social housing provider or a housing association kind of supported home, those organizations need to operate within their means. And that means that, if it's too expensive to build or too expensive to construct or too expensive to wait for planning, it's what happened in Scotland. Literally, developer demand died overnight when they brought that in. So I don't know actually that a bigger landlord is better than a smaller landlord. I worked in the bigger landlord sector, as you know. I have my own views, which probably aren't for this this webinar. I think smaller landlords do a far better job than big corporate landlords, and I think they're more compassionate as well. However, I don't know that they are necessarily favouring any of those options. I think they are very much of the view that social housing, council housing, is what they want to do. And that's fine. That's a perfectly legit strategy. But what isn't a legit strategy is if you somehow convert PRS stock to social housing, which was one of their suggestions, I think, in their reform paper. That is robbing Peter to pay Paul, because it's not growing the sector. It's just simply taking a home from one sector to another. And so I think we have to really make the argument coherently that build more social housing, review right to buy, do all of that stuff. But that will take 5, 6, 7 years realistically, to sort of see the fruits of their labour. And the crisis is now. I would have thought that to help renters, you might want to take some steps that, because at the moment, I tell you what, it feels like government prefer people in temporary accommodation in the private rented sector.
Yeah, which is way more expensive and very disruptive to families, often not having their own cooking facilities and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, being temporary accommodation is far, far, far more expensive to the taxpayer than housing somebody with a private sector landlord, for sure. Somebody's asked, is there anything positive for landlords? Well, yes, there is. Well, yeah. There are. Mortgage rates are coming down, obviously, which is good news. I would say we've got very high tenant demand, so we've got a good pool of tenants to choose from. Rents continue to rise. There's three I thought of just off the top of my head. Can you think of any, Ben?
Well, certainly, yields seem to be. Well, that said, the statistics I saw yesterday showed that actually, in the year to June, rents had held at 8.6%. Obviously, that's way above all measures of inflation. So, although that I don't necessarily see that as good news, because I've had some rent increases on my properties, Vanessa, but I can't say I felt the benefit of those rent increases. For me, I'm just passing on additional cost, and that's what I'm very keen to kind of get across in the media and stuff like that. This isn't landlords sitting at home thinking, right, how can I massively jack up the rent? Yeah, sure, I'm sure one or two people will operate in that way. But in my experience, and having just come back from Foxtons as well, where I've looked at how they do their renewals, yes, they are putting up rents, but they're not putting them up to anywhere near the sort of level that you might have thought. And that's because the market can only bear so much.
Mm.
And also, landlords are between a rock and a hard place. They're at the point where they just can't absorb any of the costs, any additional costs anymore. And so it's either put the rent up or exit. Those are the two options.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Anna Louise Williams has said mortgage rates for HMOs are certainly not coming down.
No, I agree with that. I've just done one of mine, actually. And I've got the paper here somewhere. My rate for the go, because I've just finished remortgaging it, my rate was 4.35. It's gone up to 5.35. And if I hadn't have remortgaged, it would have been on the variable rate, which would have been 9.35 or 9.85 or something. Madness. And so those people that are in the bracket of not being able to remortgage, why the hell do you think rents are going up? It's, you've got to pass some of that cost on, even though you don't want to.
Yeah, well, we are seeing very much that lenders are also kind of introducing incentives for properties with higher EPCs. I think that's definitely a direction of travel. And they are looking across entire portfolios. If you're going for one mortgage, they're looking at the EPC rating across all of your properties in your portfolio. So worth just bearing that in mind, because that's going to have a kind of impact on remortgaging as well, because lenders are definitely coming out with more and more green products with more favourable rates.
100%. Vanessa, there's a question here, actually,
Yep.
if you don't mind, addressed to me, which is, do you think that the government take any notice of the points that you make when you speak on behalf of NRLA and landlords? So I think that's a very, very fair question. I always felt anonymous attendee, very listened to by the previous administration, but accepting that they were moving in a particular direction. We had very, very good dialogue there. And we also had very, very good dialogue with civil servants right the way across government in the different kind of departments that are responsible for various elements of housing. I think I've been pleased with the stuff that we've been quoted on. But at the end of the day, we are not going to stop the direction of travel. We have to be really clear about that. A win for us is about, I guess, kind of being able to convey those voices. And okay, well, you want to do rental reform. Let's not make it retrospective. Let's have a decent lead in time. Let's let the sector adjust. That would be a significant victory in the context of what we're now dealing with. So it's all relative. I was one of the first ones in to see Matthew Pennycook. I had a good 45 minutes with him. He was courteous. He listened, but his interests are not our interests, I think, and that is just the way the cookie crumbles.
Well, you did very well because you got Michael Gove to the National Landlord Conference last year, which just leads me to say to remind everybody that time is flying by, and the 2024 conference is booked for the 6th of November at the Birmingham NEC, and we would urge you to get your tickets as soon as you can because they are selling out fast, and it's going to be another great day. So we encourage you to get your tickets now.
And don't forget that our wonderful host, Nick Knowles, is appearing on Strictly. So if you are a Strictly fan like me, I watch very little TV, but Strictly is my advice on a Saturday night. I think it could be very, very interesting. I'm really looking forward to it now. There we
Okay.
go. So I'd share that with you.
And you've got James Caan as well, haven't you?
Yeah, we've got James Caan, and I hope to be able to announce one or two political representatives in due course as well.
Well, I shall be there with bells on.
Hey,
So,
nothing else
I'm
to
looking
share.
forward to it. Let's move on to our next trending topic. We've got a few more minutes left. Um, we've got a very prolific landlord on Property Tribes who uses the name Dyslexic Landlord. She's based in Newcastle upon Tyne. She's got a very sizable portfolio. She's very active in landlord groups. And she is always talking about yield. She's based her entire property business on having 8% yield or more. And somebody started a new thread on Property Tribes. What do landlords on our forum feel is a good rental yield? Well, dyslexic landlord would say 8% or don't buy it. But it's not a one size fits all answer, is it, Ben?
No, it's not. I guess it depends what your longer term strategy is. Because there'll be some people that perhaps aren't worried too much about the yield, but they're going after the capital growth, which is a perfectly legit strategy. I guess from my perspective, I want both. I want to make sure it washes its face. And hopefully I'm going to have something there when I'm even grayer than I am now, and look to cash those chips in. But I would agree that I don't know whether 8% yields exist now at current rates.
Well,
depending on what you bring to the
makes
table.
it, yeah, dyslexic landlord makes it stack up 8% with properties in her patch, which she knows like the back of her hand. I think it is more challenging for sure. And as you mentioned, some landlords would be happy with maybe 5% if they're in high capital growth areas. And that's what they're seeking more than the month on month net cash flow. But I always say that I think yield should come first, because if you have net month on month cash flow, you're more likely to be able to remain in the game long enough to achieve organic capital growth. And we all agree, Ben, that property is a very long-term investment. You should be looking 20, 25 years. But I think it's an interesting question to ponder, particularly when you're starting out in buy-to-let, because it could influence the types of properties you buy and the areas you buy in. But you definitely want to be achieving net month-on-month cash flow after all expenses. I came up with an article. Actually, this is just our final topic, and it was, how do you time the market to invest in buy-to-let? And it's a bit of a tricky one, because your options are to buy in a falling sales market, buy in a static sales market, a rising sales market, or any time as long as the deal stacks up. Or you could have the option, because I made this into a kind of poll, if you're an existing investor, should you be selling up, not buying? So we've got this very long discussion on Property Tribes with the poll, which has been very interesting. And somebody added one of the options and suggested the additional option of if government policies make it viable, which I thought was quite pertinent for our moment in time. But my option is, if the deal stacks up, then you should buy, because you can't buy in the past, and unless you've got a time machine, you can't go forward into the future and buy in the future. So all any of us can do is buy in the now, which is today, the present moment. And when we're buying, Ben, we can only really deal with the conditions within the market that we know about. It's very hard to start thinking or trying to predict things. And we have to deal with the mortgage products that are available today. But I think so much about being successful in anything in life is taking action on a daily basis, and just constantly trying to move forward. Would you agree?
I would agree, and it's one of the questions actually, Vanessa, that I've answered in the chat by typing, is about kind of younger investors coming in to the market, and that is something that we are seeing, and they're doing so with their eyes wide open. They understand that Section 21 won't be about. They understand what they'll be paying from a tax perspective. And I think that the annoying thing is, having been in the property game for 20 years, it's, you know, you enter into something hoping, well, I guess hoping it's not going to change, like Section 24, and then all of a sudden something does change. These guys and girls are already adapted to, you know, higher quality EPC rating, higher quality home, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And, you know, they're actively investing. Whether they've got balls of steel or not, I don't know. But certainly that is something that we are seeing at the moment. And clearly it works for some people.
Mm. Well, I think it kind of highlights the importance of being an informed and educated landlord. You know, being a member of the NRLA, being on property forums, subscribing to news feeds, taking part in webinars like this. Because if you're not, you're almost like a ship at sea that's not receiving the weather forecast. You know, at least landlords that are being informed and educated are making choices based on you know, reliable information from reliable sources, and that's a very, very important part of you know, risk mitigation in any business, I would say. I was just going to say, Alex Gilly said it's more of a statement than a question, but he much prefers to look at an investment by measuring ROCI, which is return on cash invested, than yield. And actually, I have heard that, and it's very interesting, Ben, to hear how different landlords assess deals. And I think that's part of the benefit of being part of any kind of community, is that you're learning all of these different approaches to things, and you can try them on and see which feels right for you.
100%. And this is where, you know, forums like this add real value, I think, because there'll be people listening into that and thinking, oh, never particularly heard of that yield measurement, for example. And it is about kind of being an informed investor, as we said. And hopefully this gives people a little bit more insight than they would get ordinarily.
Mm. Well, let's just see if there's any other questions we need to just answer.
Well,
Did anybody want to own up that they voted Labour? If so, are they happy with their choice? Yes.
I hear a deafening silence.
Yes.
There's one question here, Vanessa. Is the limited company structure a better option now? Briefly, make sure you take the right sort of advice with regards to that. It depends what it is that you're after. It may well be for corporation tax purposes, but it may well be disadvantageous in other ways. So I wouldn't say that that's a one size fits all. Take some advice on that.
Do you know what, Ben? That's probably one of the rare questions which I would say a forum advice is not appropriate, because how you structure your tax affairs is so personal to you and your situation and what you want to achieve out of your investment career. And as Ben said, there is no one size fits all, and it really is important to get your advice from a reputable professional and qualified tax advisor, and they will run both scenarios, or the scenarios that are available to you, and work out which is the best structure for you. But there's certainly nothing wrong in having some properties in a personal name, so you can maybe access better mortgage rates. And you know, if you want to take a regular income from the properties, doing it in your personal name is a lot simpler than being in a company structure. So there's nothing to say you can't have kind of a mix of both, really. But it's very important to get professional tax advice in that regards. Okay, then. What's your next kind of interaction with the new Labour government, Ben? Do you have anything on the horizon?
Yeah, we do. So the team are have a number of meetings planned with individual MPs. I hope to be participating in a sector roundtable in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, it's not going to clash with my holiday. Otherwise, my other half will be particularly annoyed that I jump back on the plane and go and meet Mr. Pennycook again. We also have really good engagement with Baroness Taylor of Stevenage. And interestingly, Sharon, obviously, you know, toes very much the party line, but this is a really good example of where we sort of fallen on some stuff that we can work together on. It concerns local housing allowance, because I noticed they've not made any suggestion about unfreezing local housing allowance, despite it being called for previously, and they're not doing that because it's bloody expensive. But Baroness Taylor is an advocate of direct payment to landlords when it comes to LHA and housing benefit, and I think, yeah, that's one area that we will be pushing very, very hard. We have to choose our battles, and that's one I think that we might have some success on. So I think what we have to do is to wait and see at the end of the summer where the Labour Party have landed in terms of some of the detail. But rest assured that we will be like a rat up a drain pipe as far as lobbying and campaigning for fair changes along the lines that we've discussed.
Well, excellent. And it's so good that you are engaging with government and getting these intricacies of our sector across. There's one question that come in, Ben. I've just got to finish on it because it's brilliant, and I might add it to property tribes, and it's I think it will get a lot of interest. It's from anonymous attendee again. Don't know if it's the same one. What do you think the private rented sector will look like in 5 years' time? Have you got your crystal ball with you?
Stick Meg. What do I think it will look like in 5 years' time? I don't think it will be massively dissimilar from what it is now, to be honest with you. I think I don't think we will see it grow. I think we will see some landlords consolidate, but 5 years isn't enough, I don't think, to affect real change. I think, you know, heaven forbid we're still on a landlord lens together in 5 years' time. God, I should be 48. Oh God, that's terrible. Anyway,
so Ben, in 5 years' time, I'll be 67.
Oh wow, get you.
So you're way behind me, mate.
Wow, looking good, Vanessa. That's all I'm going to say. But no, I don't think it will change dramatically, but I think we will be abiding by a new regime when it comes to Section 21. I think we'll have more energy efficient homes. I think we'll have more consolidation in the sector. And I suspect that we will be talking about a large number of the issues that we continually talk about, because in absence of any real action on housing supply, it will just, you know, it will just carry on as we are. But in theory, we should be 1.5 million homes up.
Yeah.
So it's going to be all good then, won't it?
Well, I'm going to diarise to check back in 5 years' time and see if those 1.5 million homes were built. One thing, actually, I think, you know, may happen is that if there is a capital gains tax increase, those landlords who kept remortgaging and leveraging up through just organic capital growth over the years, they may not be able to sell because their capital gain might be more than actually the money that they would achieve from a sale of a property, and some landlords may be trapped and not able to sell. So yes, there are challenging times ahead, but what I love about property is that if you're educated and informed, you can always find a way forward. And one of my favorite sayings, Ben, is real problems always have real solutions. It's only imagined ones that seem insurmountable. So if there's a real problem, between us, the hive mind of landlords, we'll find a way forwards, won't we?
Absolutely, 100%.
All right. Well, thank you to everybody for joining us on the August Landlord Lens. Thank you very much for all your questions and interactions. We really do appreciate it. This will be available on the NRLA YouTube and Property Tribes as a recording. And I do want to invite our viewers to jump across to Property Tribes and actually go and have a look at some of these trending topics, and maybe add your thoughts to them as well, because it all helps increase the landlord data bank of knowledge and opinion. So I'd love everybody to pop over to Property Tribes and join us there. But for now, Ben, let's just say again, 6th of November, Birmingham NEC, the National Landlord Conference. Do get your tickets ASAP, because it probably will sell out.
We're hoping to get 1,200 people this time around, so and we're well on the way. So it would be a great day. Really looking forward to seeing everybody. And if that wasn't enough, we've got a couple of mini conferences in the autumn as well. One in Manchester, one in London. You can get details on the website.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you on the next edition of the Landlord Lens, or maybe somewhere down the property trail.
See you soon.